Hello everyone, today I'm going to talk about the new content added in chapter 5, so a lot of the new recipes and also the new free character Regina, who I haven't talked about yet. Before I talked about the banner units, now we're going to go over Regina. You get her, a little bit into chapter 5. She comes for free. You get all of her pieces for Awakening, leveling her up to 60, so you can get her to 5-star for free. And Regina is a fire defender. She's a bit of a niche unit. I would say overall she's not that good or useful, but she does have some very specific use cases where you might find her as a proper solution to a problem you're facing, and that is because she is specifically focused on countering counters. So her passive here, Bring It On, it doesn't have taunt like defender passives normally do, so she doesn't taunt passively. However, when an enemy's counterattack is single target, she takes the counter instead of the targeted ally and reduces its damage by 10%. So things like sheep, jellyfish, I think the armor suits are usually area counters, so these wouldn't count, but like sheep and jellyfish, when an ally would attack them and they would counterattack, Regina will intercept that counterattack and take less damage from it. So this can be useful in those situations where you have squishy characters that you don't want to get countered. However, there's a little bit of a caveat here where when Regina's taking multiple counterattacks in a row because she's intercepting them all, she's not actually tanky enough to, successfully, she's not tanky enough. She will die, right? If she takes too many counters, she will just die. So it can often be better to spread those counterattacks out among your party like they normally would be. So it's like a little bit hit or miss, right? She can be okay, but she can also just straight up die to the counters, and it's like, yeah. She's fairly weak as a defender. So she's good for counters, weak as a defender generically, but sometimes she'll just die to the counters anyway, so she's really good for them. It's basically up to the specific content, right? Then as far as her skills go, her skill 1 does nothing, so it's literally just for rearranging the timeline. Her skill 2, it has a decent damage rate, and after attacking restores HP by 20%. This is a pretty good amount of sustain. It's really not terrible, especially with healing traits on her. 20% is quite a large amount of HP. And then her burst, pretty low damage rate for a burst, which makes sense because she's a defender, kind of high break. Boost damage by 30% when her HP is above 50%. And then after attacking, it restores her HP by 30% if her HP is low. So how to quantify these skills? Basically, she is a defender without taunt, without passive damage damage reduction, but she has okay sustain. And she has a damage boost on her burst. Basically, in my opinion, she is kind of like a weak attacker with sustain. She's not really a defender because of the lack of taunt, but she has okay damage rates on her skills. She has this damage boost on her burst, and she has decent sustain. So she can be okay if you build her like an attacker, really. I wouldn't build her like your standard defender because she is not really doing that defensive job except against counters. But basically, she's just not very good. I have used her in Fire Tower before on JP, but that's only because that account doesn't have Ryza. If that account had Ryza, I'm not sure I would ever use her. But you can mess around with her if you run into trouble with counters and try her. I personally haven't done it very much because of the problem I mentioned before, where, she takes 2-3 counters in a row and she just dies to them anyways, so it doesn't really help your team that much. But yeah, that's basically how Regina is. Niche character, not that great. But she's a 1-star, what do you expect? She is actually the last free story 1-star that we are going to be getting maybe forever, I don't know. She was the last one we got in JP so far, up to chapter 9. We have not received another free 1-star from story. There are a couple from events in the future, but not from the main story, so Yeah, this game really doesn't like handing us out 1 stars, but that's fine. If they're gonna be this week, I really don't think Regina is very good. And now how about the recipes that came with chapter 5? I don't usually like going through recipes because I think they're pretty straightforward what they're good for, but I will go through and give you my thoughts and opinions on the new recipes, and just tell me if you think it's good info, if you want me to do this more, and I will. I haven't unlocked them all yet. It's only been a couple days. I haven't, gone through and done all the content yet, but I do more or less know what all the recipes do, and I can tell you whether or not they're good. So we have Protection Powder, reduces damage received by the ally with highest max HP for 15% by 50% for 2 attacks. This is a usable item. I would say this item is basically pretty bad. Usually damage reduction on your defenders is not the issue. It's more like sustain. You can get damage, like your defenders are tankier than everyone else. There might be niche circumstances where this is applicable, but most battles in the game are heavy area damage and not heavy single target damage, and you would just rather have a better item like a healing item or more damage for your characters. If this was area range, it would actually potentially be quite good and quite useful, but because it's only single target, it basically kind of sucks. No one really uses this. Next we have the Enchanted Broom. This is the weapon intended for Willbell. When equipped to an attacker with fire affinity, boosts skill damage of attacks that target all enemies by 16%. It's a magic attack weapon. This weapon is only good on Willbell. You can make an argument to use it on Fire Resna, but I really wouldn't, because it's not going to affect her skill 2. For Willbell it will. I have always said, the best items to make in this game are the items you have materials for. This weapon's quite expensive, requiring 30 of these and 10 of these. I would say it's a pretty low priority to make. Even if you have Willbell, you're just better off making other weapons that you can spam more, because when it takes hundreds to thousands of attempts to get the right traits on a weapon, you don't really want to be making something that's not only expensive, but only particularly good on one character, right? So it's just not a very great option. But if you absolutely want Willbell's best in slot, this is up there. It's a very high amount of damage boost. Personally, if you're going to make niche weapons, I would wait for better weapons down the line. We get better stuff, maybe not for fire, but for other elements in general, like when we get the recipes for Affinity Tower. So yeah, you can try making a few of these if you really want to for Willbell, but I don't recommend it. And then we have Neo's weapon, the Metal Stir. This thing just straight up sucks. While equipped to a defender with strike affinity, after using a skill, reduces all allies' damage received by 2% for 1 attack. This thing is bad. That's just a very negligible amount of damage reduction, especially if you really want damage reduction for your other characters, you would go with area defense. It's just not good. As far as defenders go, you would rather go with something like Fortune's Light, which will, heal them. Was Fortune's Light the right one that I'm thinking of? It's an extra somewhere. There's Flourish Heart, which is heal. And yeah, Fortune's Light is also a heal. Or no, Fortune's Light is the damage reduction. Fortune's Light's pretty good. Damage reduction for your defenders. Flourish Heart is also good because it's sustain for your defenders. These are much better generic defender weapons. And they're generic. Like, they're much better for Neo, and they're much better generically. So definitely recommend those over the Metal Stir. This thing it's not good. Then we have the Mystic Talisman. So this is a slash supporter item. It is currently completely worthless. We have no slash supporters in the game. This item was intended for Halloween Pravda. So because the Halloween banner got skipped, and as far as we know, she's not coming to the game anytime soon, there's a whole set of slash supporter gear in the game that is just completely useless. And this is one of them. Never make this right now. Then we have the Feather Pin. which is an accessory for Wilbel. While equipped to an attacker with fire affinity, after using a skill, restores own HP by 6%. It's also decent on Ryza. Honestly, I don't like this accessory very much because it is speed focused. It doesn't have HP on it, it has all speed. I don't think you really want this much speed on your attackers generally because it can be harder to get your breakers in front of them. So speed focused accessories are kind of weak, plus the amount of sustain is kind of mediocre. It's still kind of better than other options. That said, I feel like if you do want to make this type of accessory, you're better off making Godspeed boots, which is a lower amount of sustain, but it's for all attackers and not just fire characters, right? So I think you're better off making Godspeed boots than the feather pin, because this one's much more limited to only fire attackers. However, just in general, I don't think this accessory is very good personally. There are people that definitely like it. It can be okay in dungeons if you don't want to take a healer, but I would just rather make something cheaper, like any of the event accessories, like the tiara from Maru, and try to get good skill power on that. So yeah, I don't like this item. Then we have the Stall Ice Bomb. It is a usable item that hits all enemies, or it's an attack item. Attack items aren't very good. This one is ice with 150% damage rate. Usually with this type of item, you'll be using it to consume, buff stacks on enemies by doing damage to them, or you'll be using it to apply certain debuffs. If you need specific things for affinity towers, such as resistance down, there's a few affinity tower floors that need that, so putting a resistance down trait onto this item can be very good for that. But as an actual damaging item, attack items are not good, right? They have very niche use cases, and this one's a bit better than most because it hits all enemies instead of a single enemy. But you wouldn't be using it for damage, you'd be using it for utility. And if you get to content where you know that you need this utility, you will make this item. Otherwise, yeah, don't worry about it. Next we have the Wanderer's Clothes, which are, when equipped to attacker with fire affinity, boost potency of received buff effects by 23%. Now this item is very good. Potency of received buff effects is a very powerful stat at this value because it is the only way to affect your buff items. So like this 23% will apply to Draken Elixirs applied to the character. So bringing them from, their base 60% up to like 72%. So that's an extra 36% skill damage when you're bursting with like Draken Elixirs. That is huge. So even though this is a very niche armor, it's only for fire attackers, we have strong fire attackers like Ryza, like Wilbel. This item is very, very, very good. So, if you're willing to put in the effort to grind out these materials, like 30 Ihiolas per synth, then yeah, it's a very good item. I will say that in the future, at the half-year anniversary, which will be in a few months, all of these recipes get reduced in material costs by like 90%. So it may be worth waiting to make them in the future. But if you want to make them now, play the game, have fun, right? So this item is basically good forever though. This is a really, really, really powerful effect. Definitely a strong item. Like the same item for Valeria, the Layered Velvet Slash, it's slightly weaker and it's still like best in slot for her. Very, very solid effect at that value. Then we have the Herbal Poncho. While equipped to a defender with strike affinity, reduces damage received from single target attacks by 10%. This is a very, very strong damage reduction effect. 10% damage reduction is huge. However, it's not like super... So Neo is kind of a mediocre strike defender. This item is actually honestly better on, say, Oscar or Lent if you're using them. There's a lot of strike defenders in the game, so it's a very good item if you are using a strike defender. It's still good on Neo, but because she doesn't have taunt, it loses a bit of value, but she still has her cover, so she will still be taking single target attacks sometimes. For strike defenders, this is definitely the best in slot body armor. 10% damage reduction is just a huge amount, and you don't really need area damage reduction because of the area defense trait. So the single target, you know, the single target condition isn't weak. It's still really, really good. Very solid item. Then we have the Ore Scale Armor. While equipped to a supporter with Ice Affinity, boost potency of inflicted negative effects by 15%. This is very obviously a Claudia item. It's a really good armor if you're using Claudia. I believe it's her best in slot. It should be. This is a very high amount, 15%. So yeah, not bad for Claudia, although you might opt for a more defensive option on her if you want. It's good, right? So yeah, get one of these with like AoE defense 5, and that's basically, or damage buffs A, probably damage buffs A, and that's all Claudia needs. Like damage buffs A level 5 on this, and Claudia is good to go, right? Very solid item for Claudia. Then we have the Daylight. This is a pretty solid armor option for ice attackers. In the next chapter, we get a more generic armor option for attackers that boosts magic attack. It's 8% magic attack for attackers. Any attacker, the attribute doesn't matter. So I would rather make that one, but this is still like very good because it stacks up magic attack by 6% for 2 turns. So it you know, gets to 12% after 2 turns. Still very, very strong for ice attackers. So for Rorona, for Meru, however, it is once again fairly expensive at the moment, but you know, if you make this item, you can guarantee that it's not really going to be power crept. However, once again, it's expensive, and we do have a more generic option coming later that's fairly competitive with it. So I wouldn't exactly recommend making it. But if you really, really want to make good gear for your ice attackers, this is definitely going to be one of the better items, basically forever. Very, very solid armor here. Then we have the Cocktail Leb. This is a single target healing item that restores 30% HP to the ally with the highest max HP. So this will basically always go on your defender. If you have a defender, it's going to be consistent targeting because it's based on max HP and not current HP, right? And then after the recovery, it gives it gives a heal over time effect for 2 turns. So it's basically 60% recovery for the ally with the highest max HP. Has 3 uses. Pretty good single target healing items, one of the better ones for defenders. If you specifically need more defender sustain, very, very solid healing item. Yeah, definitely one of the better ones. The consistent targeting makes it feel really nice to use, right? Like you always know who it's going to go on, so definitely not a bad item in that regard, but it's also not used that much. Usually your defenders are outliving everyone else once you're late game, so a little awkward, but when you need it, pretty good. And then we have the EX recipes. Once again, we have an attack item, the Lava Cube. It's fire damage with a 260% damage rate. It only hits one enemy. However, it will hit the enemy with the lowest current HP, so it's good for picking off enemies. However, it's an attack item. It sucks. That's about it. Then we have the Rugged Sword. Once again, another slash supporter item. It's a very decent slash supporter item. However, it is a slash supporter item, so completely useless, like I mentioned earlier. We have the Cold Hammer. While equipped to an attacker with Ice Affinity, after using a skill, boosts own magic attack by 3% for 2 turns. This is basically just an upgraded, more expensive version of the wand from the Meru event, right? So you can see here the Princess Wand. It's the exact same thing except 2% and lower magic attack. So they just straight up power crept the wand with the Cold Hammer. However, once again, fairly expensive item requiring a lot of dungeon mats to be made. So the Princess Wand is nicer in the sense that you already have the materials for it, right? Like I could make 300 Princess Wands right now if I wanted, right? If I bought the mana. That said, the Hero Sword is generally better than the Princess Wand and it uses the same materials, so, you know. Princess Wand is still good though, like, These are both good weapons, so you can use materials on either. Princess Wand is immediately power crept by this, but because this is harder to make, it's like, do you really want to go through that effort for like an extra 1% magic attack? I mean, maybe you do. I wouldn't recommend it personally. Then we have the Assorted Candy. Boosts all supporter ally skill damage by 45% for 2 turns. Now, this sounds useless at first, and you would be right, except it's not. For generic scenarios, it's pretty useless. However, there are floors in Affinity Tower that basically require you to deal damage with supporters. Specifically the Ice and Wind Affinity Towers, Ice and Air, there are floors where enemies only take damage from area attacks, and the only source of area damage in those elements for a long time are supporters. So Toturi's Burst, Mararu's Burst. This item can be very good for boosting the damage of those bursts specifically for those Affinity Tower floors. So very, very niche item, but it does have applications. So you may find yourself using these if you're trying to prog Affinity Tower. So not bad. Then we have the Scale Armor, another slash supporter item. I probably don't need to go over this again. It's useless. The Natural Coat, which is a Lily item. It is a Bolt Breaker armor. After using a skill, boosts own stun damage by 7% for 2 turns. It's somewhat cheap. It doesn't require too many materials. However, I think it is a fairly bad breaker armor. You don't really want ramping break damage. You really want upfront break damage for your breakers. So you're still just better off making the classic... Oh wait, it's not Hard Coat. Right, Hard Coat is Fizz. The Light Iron Staff is the magic one. I got them confused. You're just better off making things that are cheap, honestly, for stun gear. Which, this is okay for Lily. It's fine. Obviously, there are better breaker armors, such as the Shrade Lumont, which works for everyone, and the Gold Embroidered Coat for single target, but these are very expensive. I don't recommend making these much at all until the recipe costs go down. However, getting these with like a single stun 5 on them, they're still very good. They're equivalent to like, you know, a stun 8, so they're not bad. They're just hard to make because they're so expensive. So like if you have Lily, this item's okay. I don't think it's very good because ramping break damage isn't very good. We'll get better options in the future. It's not really worth farming for, but if you have the materials you need stun armor, it's not a bad thing to make. I just wouldn't go out of your way for it. And then we have the Dark Leather Armor. While equipped to a supporter with air affinity, boosts potency of buff effects given by 15%. And as everyone knows, this is the best item released with this patch by far, because it is the best in slot for Ellie. I probably shouldn't make jokes like that. Ellie's really bad, so this item isn't particularly useful. It boosts potency of buff effects by 15%, which is a huge amount, but the other air supporter, Mararu, doesn't really give buffs, so kind of pointless. So it's only useful on Ellie. Now, it is best in slot for Ellie. If you're an Ellie enjoyer, then dang, go wild on this. And Ellie is actually getting some buffs with the leader skill update soon, and I'll do more on that when that actually comes in a couple weeks, but that's in Japan, not global, so it'll be a while for global. Basically, this item isn't good. I mean, it is good, but it's not good, right? Because the character's not good. But yeah, if you're an Ellie enjoyer, best in slot for her. And then we have the Orphic Ring Bolt. This is for bolt breakers. Now this is an actual good item for Lily. It's only useful on Lily, its effect, but 16% stun damage for area attacks and 10 speed, this item is cracked. Like, this item will absolutely supercharge your Lily, and look how cheap it is too. It costs 1 of each of these. Like, this item is absolutely fantastic if you use Lily, and you should definitely be making these if you use Lily, if you have her, you know? Very, very, very good accessory. Then we also have the Orphic Ring Ice, and as expected, it's a breaker item. Wait, no, it's for attackers. Yeah, so while equipped to an attacker with Ice Affinity, boosts skill damage by 12%. This one as well isn't too expensive. It has a pretty good attacker stat line of HP and speed. And however, compared to the Princess Tiara. You know, this item's much cheaper. You can probably make hundreds of these, and it's only slightly worse. So the Princess Tiara is 10%, and the Orphic Ring was 12%. Other than that, they're identical, except this one will be more expensive and it's permanent. So this is technically Bis, but because you can just make so dang many of the Princess Tiaras if you played the Meru event, I recommend making this item over the other one. Like, the 2% skill damage is not worth the amount of attempts you'll get at getting good traits, right? Like, you would rather have skill power 9 or 10 than an extra 2% skill damage. So, you know, like, from a min-max perspective, but in this game, min-max isn't super realistic. So you can't really think of everything from a min-max perspective. You have to think of things from a cost-benefit perspective a lot of the time, right? Like, is it really worth spending stamina on getting materials for something like this when you could spend that stamina on materials for, you know, something that's even better, right? And there's definitely other recipes that will take you further, you know, that you can spend stamina on. Like, even something like this that's really expensive is more worth spending stamina on. But if you have the materials anyways and you're not using them, you know, it's still not a bad thing to throw mana at, right? If you have the materials anyways. Which, you know, for a lot of items you do end up with, you just have the materials anyways without going out of your way for them. So a lot of items, you know, are more worth something if you don't have to spend stamina for the materials. Anyways, that should be about it. Somehow this video went on quite a bit longer than I expected. I guess there's a lot to talk about with each items. Let me know if you like this type of content and you want this for future chapters. I'm not a huge fan of character builds because items are so, like, it's very difficult to just make anything you want, right? You're much better off making generic items that you can swap around as you need to. But there's certain items that are strong enough that it's worth making them for specific characters or specific archetypes. And I hope I was pretty clear about which ones those are in this video. But yeah, let me know how you feel about this format, and I will see you all in the next one. Bye-bye.